What kind of woman bleeds alone on a frozen trail and still refuses help from the only man willing to save her? That was the first thought in Samuel Hartwell's mind as he found her collapsed beside the broken wagon wheel. The November wind cut sharp across the Wyoming plain, and the woman's hand was wrapped in a torn petticoat soaked through with blood. She tried to stand when she saw him, but her legs buckled and she sank against the wheel again. Samuel knelt before she could push him away. He had seen wounds like this before during the war, the kind that turned deadly if ignored. He reached for his canteen, but the woman jerked back, her jaw set in stubborn fire. "Don't you dare help me," she said. Her voice shook, but her eyes were fierce. Samuel studied her face. She looked like someone who had lost too much, someone used to fighting every inch of her life alone. The kind of pride born from heartbreak, not arrogance. He set the canteen and a bundle of clean bandages beside her without touching her. "Too late for that, ma'am," he said quietly, already decided. Quote. She glared at him like she wanted to hate him but couldn't quite manage the strength to do it. Fever brightened her cheeks. Her bandage was filthy, stiff with dried blood. She'd been riding hurt for days. Samuel could see that clearly in the erratic wheel marks leading to this point. Behind him, a small voice called from his wagon. "Papa, is the lady okay?" 7-year-old Rosie stood barefoot in the wagon opening, wrapped in her mother's old quilt. Her brown hair tumbled over her shoulders, and her eyes were wide with worry. The woman looked from Rosie to Samuel. Her face softened for just a breath, then hardened again. "I don't need your charity." "Ain't charity," Samuel answered. "It's survival. Trails like this kill fast when folks get stubborn." He didn't move closer. He'd learned long ago that some people needed space before they took a hand offered. He just stood there, steady, like a rock she could lean on if she chose to. The wind picked up. Snow flurries swirled around them. The trail ahead was empty and endless. The woman tried to rise again, gripping the wheel for balance, but her injured hand trembled. Fresh blood seeped through the cloth. Samuel waited, silent. At last, her breathing hitched. She looked at the bandages he'd placed beside her boots. She looked at the storm rolling in. She looked at Rosie's worried little face. Then she whispered, "Thank you for the offer, but I manage alone." Samuel nodded once. He expected that. He walked back to his wagon with Rosie, climbed in, clicked the horses forward until he was about 100 yards ahead. Then he stopped, made camp where she could see his fire, but not close enough to spook her pride. Rosie pressed against his side as he worked. "Papa, why won't she let us help?" "Because she's scared." "Of what?" Samuel looked toward the shadow of her wagon behind them. "Of needing someone and losing them." Night came fast. The temperature dropped. Samuel built a high fire for her to see, hoping she'd take it as permission to move closer if she needed to. Her fire burned weak and small. She didn't come. Then the wind changed. Snow thickened. The first true warning of a hard winter storm. Rosie tugged his sleeve. "Papa!" Her fire went out. Samuel turned instantly. The woman's lantern swung wildly, fighting the wind. The canvas on her wagon peeled away like paper. She stumbled after it, one hand pressed to her chest, the other reaching blindly into the dark. Then she collapsed. "She'll freeze," Rosie whispered. Samuel didn't think. He ran. The snow stung his eyes, blinding him. He dropped to his knees beside her. Her skin was ice cold. She tried weakly to push him off, but her hands had no strength left. "I told you," she whispered faintly, "no help." "And I told you," Samuel said, lifting her into his arms. "Too late for that." She weighed almost nothing. Feather light from hunger and exhaustion. He carried her through the storm, back toward his wagon where Rosie waited with wide, frightened eyes. "Blankets, Rosie," he said. "And heat the water." He laid the woman on Sarah's old quilt, unwrapped the filthy bandage. The cut was deep, red, swollen. Infection had crept up her wrist in angry streaks. Samuel's jaw tightened. "This is going to hurt," he murmured. He cleaned the wound with whiskey. The woman gasped, eyes squeezing shut, but she didn't pull away. Rosie watched silently, holding a tin cup of hot water with shaky hands. Samuel worked the way Sarah had taught him. Careful, steady, quiet. When he finished, he tucked the blankets around the woman. Her fever was dangerously high. She murmured something in her sleep, a name, maybe a prayer, but her voice was weak. "Will she be mad you helped?" Rosie whispered. "Probably," Samuel said, smoothing the blanket over her shoulder, "but she'll be alive to be mad." That night, the storm howled like a wounded animal. Snow piled against the wagon wheels. Samuel sat awake with his rifle across his knees, watching both the woman and his daughter sleep. Just before dawn, the woman cried out, trembling from fever. Rosie climbed beside her and held her hand until she quieted again. When the sun finally rose, weak and pale, Samuel climbed out to check her wagon. It was ruined, canvas ripped, axle cracked, supplies scattered and frozen, nothing salvageable enough to travel with. He stood in the snow, breathing hard. This woman wasn't just injured, she was stranded, and whether she admitted it or not, she needed him, and Rosie needed her. Samuel turned back toward the wagon where she slept, wrapped in his late wife's quilt. Snowflakes drifted around him. He had no idea yet who she was, where she was going, what heartbreak she carried. But one thing he knew for certain. The trail had brought her to him for a reason, and he wasn't going to let her walk it alone. When the woman woke the next morning, she sat up slowly, confusion clouding her face. Her eyes moved from the thick blankets around her to the stitched bandage on her hand, then to Rosie curled up beside her, breathing soft and even. The wagon felt warmer than it had any right to be in winter. She blinked hard, trying to remember how she'd gotten there. "Coffee's on," Samuel called from outside. "Figure you could use some." She stiffened at the sound of his voice. He stepped into the wagon with a tin cup in hand. His hat was dusted with snow. His coat hung heavy with frost. But his eyes were steady and calm, the way a good man's eyes looked when he wasn't asking for anything in return. She reached for the cup with her good hand. "You should have left me." Samuel shook his head. "Couldn't." She drank quietly. The hot coffee spread comfort through her chest. Her gaze fell to the quilt beneath her. "Your wife's?" she asked softly. "Sarah's," he said. "She's been gone near 3 years now." Her expression shifted. Something like understanding passed through her eyes, a familiar weight of grief. She looked toward the ruined wagon outside. "I caused you trouble." "You're breathing," Samuel replied. "Trouble's what keeps folks alive most days." Rosie stirred and sat up, rubbing her eyes. When she saw the woman awake, she smiled shyly. "Morning, ma'am. We made you warm water and porridge." The woman cleared her throat. "Thank you." Rosie beamed at the praise. Samuel watched the exchange, something soft settling in his chest. After breakfast, Samuel helped the woman stand outside. She stared at her wagon in silence. The broken axle, the torn canvas, the frozen supplies, everything she owned ruined in one night. She wrapped her arms around herself, shoulders trembling. "That was all I had," she whispered. Samuel stood beside her without touching her. "Not anymore." She shot him a sharp look. "Don't say I have you. You don't know nothing about me." "Maybe so," he said, "but I know the trail, and you're not getting to Colorado alone." At the mention of her destination, she flinched. He didn't push. Instead, he turned toward his horses. "Travel with us," he said simply. "We'll get you as far as Fort Bridger. From there, you can resupply. Decide your next step." The woman hesitated, jaw tight, as if fighting herself. She moved her injured hand carefully, studying Samuel with wary eyes. "Why?" she asked. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing." His voice was calm but firm. "You needed help. That's enough." She looked uncertain, proud, scared. But when Rosie called, "Come sit with us, ma'am," something inside her cracked. The woman let out a long, shaky sigh. "Just until Fort Bridger," she said quietly, "then I go my own way." Samuel nodded once. Fair enough. He handed her Sarah's wool shawl. The blue yarn was soft and warm. The woman hesitated, then ran her fingers across the fabric. I can't take this. It's cold, Samuel said. A shawl don't do much good sitting folded in a wagon. Her gaze softened in a way she probably didn't mean for him to see. She wrapped it around her shoulders. The wool hung heavy with memories she didn't know and comfort she didn't understand yet. She looked toward the open land. My name is Clara Bennett, she said finally. Samuel tipped his hat. Samuel Hartwell, and that little one is Rosie. Rosie waved from the wagon. Clara's lips almost formed a smile. Almost. They salvaged what they could from her wagon and loaded it into Samuel's. When they set off, Clara sat on the driver's bench beside him, looking tired but determined. The trail stretched long before them. For the first few miles, the only sounds were the creak of the wagon and the horses, hooves crunching through frost. Then Rosie scooted closer to Clara and said, You smell like snow. Clara blinked. Is that bad? Quote. No, Rosie said. Means you're brave. Samuel hid a smile. Clara stared at the child as if unsure what to do with such kindness. The next day settled into a rhythm. Samuel drove. Clara kept lookout. Rosie chattered. They shared meals, shared chores, shared cold mornings and quiet nights. Clara proved herself capable, stronger than her small frame suggested. She insisted on earning her keep, fetching water with one hand, gathering firewood, teaching Rosie how to fix tears in her dress. Samuel admired her grit, even when it frightened him. On the fourth day, he caught her straining to lift a heavy bucket. He took it from her easily. You'll tear that hand open, he warned. I won't be useless. You're hurt, Samuel said, not useless. There's a difference. She stared at him, stubborn and proud, but this time she didn't argue. They crossed a river on the sixth day. The current was strong. Samuel braced the reins. Clara held Rosie tight against her side, steady as a rock as the water rushed around them. When they made it across, Rosie cheered. Clara's smile lit her entire face, transforming her into someone softer, someone Samuel wanted to know better. That night, after Rosie slept, Clara sat by the fire. I forgot what it felt like, she whispered. What? Samuel asked. To have someone watch your back. Samuel poked the embers. Maybe you just forgot you deserve it. Clara looked at him then, really looked. For a few seconds, she didn't seem guarded or distant. She just looked tired, human. Hurt, hopeful. The silence between them felt warm, not heavy. 4 days from Fort Bridger, the wind shifted cold. Too cold. A warning. Samuel frowned. Storm's coming. Clara glanced at the dark horizon. How bad? Quote, bad enough we need to move fast. Bad enough to change plans. Clara stared into the fire. Samuel could almost hear the thoughts fighting inside her. Then she spoke. Quiet, honest. What if I'm not ready to leave when we reach Fort Bridger? Quote, Samuel's heart paused, but he kept his voice calm. Then you don't. Clara swallowed hard. What if staying means wanting more than I should? Samuel met her gaze. What if wanting means you finally found a place you belong? Clara didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. The storm clouds rolled closer. The wind sharpened. The trail ahead was getting dangerous. The space between them was getting closer. And neither of them was ready for how fast everything was about to change. The storm hit faster than anyone expected. One moment the sky was gray and heavy, and the next a wall of white came roaring across the plains like a living thing. Samuel barely had time to shout before the wind slammed into them, nearly knocking Rosie off her feet. Inside the shack, he yelled. An abandoned line shack stood a short distance off the trail, half sunken, roof slanted, but shelter all the same. Samuel grabbed Rosie while Clara fought against the wind, her shawl whipping behind her like a flag in a war she didn't ask to fight. They reached the shack just as visibility dropped to almost nothing. Inside, the air was cold, the floor covered in dust and old straw, but it was walls. And tonight, walls meant survival. Samuel blocked the broken door with their supplies while Clara got Rosie settled by the old stone fireplace. "How long will it last?" Clara asked, her voice tight with fear. "Could be a day," Samuel said. "Could be 3. They didn't have food for 3 days. Didn't have wood for 3 days. Didn't have the strength. But they had each other. The first day passed in tense silence. They took turns resting. They rationed each bite of food. Rosie clung to Clara, who held her steady and warm despite exhaustion pulling at her bones. On the second day, Rosie developed a fever. Her small face flushed, her eyes bright with sickness. Clara touched her forehead and met Samuel's eyes across the dim shack. He saw his own terror reflected in hers. "She's burning up," Clara whispered. Samuel's heart dropped. "No, no, no." They used the last medicine. They cooled her with melted snow. They held her and prayed. Samuel paced the tiny room, feeling helpless and furious at the world, furious that loss kept trying to take what little he had left. Clara rocked Rosie through the long night, singing hymns she hadn't sung since she herself was a child. Samuel watched her, chest tight with something deeper than fear. Courage. She was fighting for Rosie with everything she had. The third morning, Samuel went outside to check on the horses. A layer of ice hid a deep hole beneath the snow. His foot plunged in, twisting his ankle so violently that pain shot up his leg like fire. He hit the ground hard. He crawled back inside, dragging his leg behind him. Clara saw the limp instantly. "Sit," she commanded. "Now." "I'm fine," he growled. "Samuel Hartwell, let me see that ankle." It wasn't a request. He sat. She unwrapped his boot gently. His ankle was swollen, purple, angry. Clara's hands were steady, but her breathing was shaky. She tore strips of her own petticoat and bound the swelling tight. Then she fashioned a crutch from a broken board. "You shouldn't waste supplies on me," he muttered. "Hush!" Now all 3 of them were injured, tired, near empty, and the woodpile was nearly gone. That night, the fire shrank to orange embers. Rosie whimpered in her sleep, her fever rising again. Clara wrapped the shawl around them both, pulling the child close. Samuel lay on his bedroll, ankle throbbing, watching Clara hold Rosie like she was her own. "I can't lose her," Samuel whispered. "I can't lose either of you." Clara looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You won't. We survived together." She reached out her free hand. Samuel took it. Their fingers locked, connected in fear and hope and something deeper. 3 people. 1 shawl. 1 dying fire. A storm trying its best to kill them. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, their hearts beat stubborn against the storm. When dawn finally came, the world outside glowed pale and still. Clara blinked awake. Rosie lay against her, breathing steady and cool. The fever had broken. "Samuel," Clara whispered, trembling. "She's better." Quote. Samuel sat up fast, wincing at the pain in his ankle. He touched Rosie's forehead. "Normal, blessedly normal. I'm hungry," Rosie murmured. Samuel laughed, a choked, grateful sound. "That's my girl." They shared the last of their hardtack in melted snow. The storm had passed. Weak sunlight filtered through cracks in the wall. They were alive. With Clara's help, Samuel stood. His ankle hurt, but he could bear weight. They packed what was left of their supplies and stepped outside. The world was white, quiet, and cold. But it was open. They could walk out. Samuel leaned on Clara's shoulder, his hand gripping hers. She supported him without hesitation. Rosie held both their hands, her small face glowing with relief. 3 figures on a vast white landscape, moving slowly, but together. Halfway down the trail, Clara stopped walking. Samuel turned. "Everything all right?" She took a shaky breath. "I was going to Colorado to prove I could do life alone." He nodded. "I know. But the trail taught me something." She stepped closer. "Alone isn't strength. It's fear pretending to be strength." He swallowed hard. "Clara? I don't want to go my own way," she said. "Not anymore." Her eyes shone with a quiet, brave truth. I want to stay, with you, with Rosie. I want a family. Samuel's voice broke. You sure? Quote, I've never been more sure of anything. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then come all the way. My claim's got room for 3. A smile trembled on her lips. Then 3 it is. Rosie squeezed Clara's hand. You're already home, the child said. You just didn't know it. Clara knelt and hugged her tight. I know it now, sweetheart. 4 days later, they reached Fort Bridger. The doctor checked them, confirming what Clara already knew in her heart. They were bruised, battered, but safe. On their second night at the fort, Samuel asked Clara to walk with him. They stopped at the small chapel where evening sun lit the windows gold. Clara Bennett, he said softly, will you marry me? Properly. Not because you need protection. Because we need each other. Because we're already a family. Quote. Tears filled her eyes. I choose you, Samuel. I choose Rosie. I choose us. The preacher married them that evening. Rosie stood between them grinning, holding Sarah's shawl like it was holy. Months later, in their small cabin nestled in a quiet valley, Clara planted winter seeds. Samuel built a table. Rosie handed him nails and talked endlessly. Snow fell soft around their new home. Rosie climbed into Clara's lap that night and whispered, Mama, is this home now? Clara kissed her forehead. Yes, sweetheart, this is home. Samuel wrapped his arms around them both. The shawl, Sarah's and now Clara's too, hung beside the hearth, 2 patterns stitched together. Clara looked around the cabin, her family beside her, warmth filling a space once empty. It wasn't the life she planned. It was better. Sometimes the trail doesn't break you. Sometimes it leads you exactly where you belong. And Clara finally knew. Home wasn't a place. Home was them.